We were asked the other day, what makes a good company? Sometimes it's the simpler questions that can be more thought-provoking. We thought we'd make a video of 5 attributes of what makes a successful company. So there's a million things that can make a company good or can make a company bad, but when you really boil it down, if a company can be excellent at these 5 attributes, it would almost be impossible for the company not to be successful. And so focus on these things. Just like in anything in life, 80% of the results come from the 20% of the lower hanging fruit in a situation. So if these things can be focused on, done well, and hammered home, it's very difficult to fall off the trail. And sometimes business isn't about doing all of the brilliant things exceptionally well and being a genius. It's about not messing up the simple things, focusing on the fundamentals, and doing them consistently for an outrageously long period of time. And so the first of these, harping on that idea of consistency, is a consistent sales effort. Now, this doesn't always mean a consistent sales output. Now, ideally, inputs will ultimately yield outputs, but the sales effort has to be number and metric-driven processes for sales. And that sounds more complicated than it is, but it's basically saying if you have a sales force that finds clients through direct email, through direct phone calls, through ad marketing, through social media, whatever it is, it needs to be quantified and measured. And so we make X phone calls, it gets us Y meetings, which leads to Z clients. We put X dollars into ads, it brings in Y warm leads, which leads to Z clients. We put out X amount of social media content, it yields Y conversations, which leads to Z clients. So whatever place you're starting at, it ultimately is going to funnel down to clients. And a good company knows how to consistently measure that, and more importantly, taking a step further, how to consistently make those inputs. So if it's the calls, if it's the meetings, if it's the social media, if it's the ad spend, they do it consistently because it is a compounding effect. It's not linear. What I mean by that is that you're not going to see the results on the front end. It tends to be more back heavy, but it compounds over time so that as you do it, you get better at doing it and it yields better results. And there's always this delayed effect to it. And so it must almost be done in a vacuum to begin with for an adequate amount of time to see those results. The second attribute is a well-outlined fulfillment. And so if you have a company that sells, whatever the product, service, or offering is, you then must fulfill or execute, do the thing, provide the service, make the good, whatever the case may be, that has to be well outlined. There has to be a seamless conveyor belt, if you will, of client or customer coming on to client or customer getting the dream outcome or whatever it is that they're looking for, and then either staying with the business, or if it's a transaction-oriented thing, going out and telling the world about how wonderful it is. But that has to be pinpointed along the way. It can't be random, it can't be sloppy, there can't be 1,000 different paths. It has to be very linear, and it has to be well-defined on how to best serve the client and how to do it efficiently, expeditiously, efficaciously. The third is the people component of the business. You need people that are eager and incentivized to execute and do everything that the company needs to be done. And I'm not sure if it was Henry Ford, but somebody said that if the people left the factories, they'd be grown over with vines within a month. But if the factory burned down, the people would have a new one built within that same time period that would be even better and more productive. Strike that. I believe that was actually Andrew Carnegie. Nonetheless, the point remains, a company must have dedicated people who are encouraged and incentivized to execute. And so it's a balance. You're not going to just give everybody more money and expect them to work if you treat them poorly. And you're not going to expect that if you're the nicest person in the world and come around shaking hands, but you don't take care of them financially and their ability to feed their families, that they're going to work as well. And so it's a balance, but employees need to be incentivized, employees need to be engaged. And so if you look at any company and you say, let's look at the workforce, let's go around and talk to the people who actually do the things and do the fulfillment or do the sales, you can get a very quick read on their attitude and tone. And if it's good, it's more indicative of a good company, and if it's bad, well, the converse tends to be true. Fourth attribute of successful business is that they understand the economics of the business. And this doesn't mean you have to be Milton Friedman or Adam Smith. I mean the economics of the things that the business actually does. And so we split that into 2 categories, one being the unit economics, the other being the operating cost base. And so what we mean by this is, let's say you're a company that sells pencils. Every pencil sells for $1 and you make 50 cents of profit on the pencil. We would say the unit economics or the gross profit on each pencil sold is 50 cents. Now, if the company cost $1,000 to run, fixed costs, administrative, salaries, machinery, things like that, we would consider that $1,000 cost the operating base. And so what you think of with a company is you have a sale, you have the gross profit after the cost of delivering the product, service, or offering, and then that contributes to your operating base. And once you have enough sales of whatever it is, it will exceed the operating base and you will have profit. And so you can think of it very simply as operating costs being more fixed costs and the cost of goods sold being more variable. The more you sell, the higher the costs are. Now in reality, there's operating expenses that are both variable and fixed, but for simplicity's sake, one can think of a business in this way to have a very simplified understanding of it. So in our example, if you sold 10 pencils for $10 and you had $5 of cost, and so you had $5 to then contribute to the operating expenses of $1,000, you'd say, well, I need to sell more pencils. So if you had 100 pencils, you'd have $50 to contribute. If you had 1,000 pencils, you'd have $500 to contribute. If you had 2,000 pencils, you would have $1,000 to contribute. So $2,000 is effectively the break even, the Mendoza line of the business, where you must sell more than 2,000 pencils to A, cover the cogs of the business, as well as cover the operating base. But every pencil you sell thereafter would make a profit to the bottom line of 50 cents. And so that's the way we often like to talk to businesses to understand and say, what are the unit economics of the product? And sometimes people just look at the gross margin. Well, we sell it for $1 and we make 70 cents on it. But if the operating base is huge where they need to sell an enormous amount, or if there's just variable costs within the operating base that never let there be a profit, that's a problem. There used to be a cartoon that said, hey boss, we lose 50 cents on every widget. And the boss said, don't worry, we'll make it up in volume. It doesn't happen that way. And so, if you understand the economics of a business, both on a unit and operating base level, it's far more likely it's going to be successful. And lastly, and this could be probably the most qualitative element here, and we've talked about it in other videos as a combination of kind of strategy and tactics, is a vision. What is the goal of the company? Now let me tell you, if you have a locked-in vision for a business, you may succeed in doing that thing. If you don't, I can almost guarantee that you're not going to, right? It's the old expression that if you think you can do something, you may be able to, but if you don't think you can do it, I can almost assure you that you won't. And so with a business, the vision is important. And it doesn't need to be, we're gonna save the planet and stop the sun from being hot and do all of these wonderful things in the world, but it does mean a vision for the company. We see this gap in the market, we wanna be the best at this thing, and here's our path of accomplishing that. And it could be as simple as there's an inefficient space within the distribution market for a particular type of industrial product. There's a software need in this industry because of this real painful part of the business that is a real anachronism. And so having the vision, and the vision doesn't need to be this wildly sexy, beautiful, save the world type thing. The vision can be, candidly, to make a lot of money by solving a problem for a large group of well-funded customers. That's perfectly fine, but there does have to be a vision. You're not going to wander your way through business and end up in a very good situation. It has to be deliberate, and even if it's step by step, and even if that changes along the way, as all visions will evolve along the way, it's still important to have that vision. So, if someone were to come to us and say, how do you know if this is a good or bad business? I'd say, tell me about these 5 things. To recap, consistent sales efforts, a well-outlined fulfillment or execution process, people that are encouraged and incentivized to execute, understanding of the business economics, both unit economics and operating cost base, and having a vision for the business. If I can look at those 5 attributes for a business, I can have a pretty good handicapping or probability as to whether it's a good business or a successful business or not. And so that's the thought for today. Hope the week continues to go well for everyone. Keep pushing forward. God bless. See everyone next time.